Good morning, dear students. Welcome to the second session of the subject Computer Organization and Architecture in Module 1. So in the previous session, we just discussed about the functional blocks of a computer and terminologies related to that. So we'll try to continue and look into some more aspects of this particular module. So in this session, we'll be looking at the memory concept, the bus structure, and basic operational concepts, and something related to the software. Okay. Now, as we all know, memory is an integral functional part of a computing system, any computing system, be it your mobile phone, your laptop, your desktop, or anything like that. And this is one of the major performance improvement module also. If you have a faster memory, the performance of the system is better. So basically, the memory is classified into two categories, primary and secondary. The primary memory is also known as semiconductor memory, main memory, internal memory. See, these are all synonyms. Okay. And primary memory is basically again a semiconductor IC. So integrated circuit. I told you in the last class. So all this design is done using integrated circuits. In basic electronics, if you have studied about this, it's good. Otherwise, in other subject DSD, you will again study about what is an IC. Okay. So primary memory is basically a semiconductor memory where information is stored in the form of bits. Last class I explained that. The types of primary memory basically earlier classified into RAM and ROM, which is read-write memory and read-only memory. Okay. So read-only memory, name itself says you cannot write into it directly. So it is ROM. And read-write memory, that means you can read whatever is already available, or you can try to write a new information. That is read-write memory. Read-write memory in the nomenclature or the literature is always called as RAM, even though it is not actually a correct terminology, but most of the books will give it as RAM only, random access memory. So what is random access memory? Random access memory is where independent of the position of the data, the access time is constant. Okay, access time is constant and is independent of the position of the data in the memory. Now, memory, I can give an analogy like, so assume a classroom as a memory. So there are a lot of desks in the classroom, right? That means memory consists of so many rows like that, or which we call as technically locations. So when you have, suppose a person is sitting in the first row and a person is sitting in the last row. But I take the same time to address the first person as well as the last person, independent of his sitting position, right? Whether he is in the first row or the last row. That is what is called as random access memory. Okay. Of course, read-only memory is also random access. Okay, but unfortunately, many of the books will give the name random access as read-write memory. So we'll try to use read-write memory and RAM interchangeably. Okay. One of the problem with the RAM is it is volatile memory. What I mean by volatile memory is the content of this memory would be lost if you switch off your power. That is why we go for ROM, where contents are permanently stored. So even if you switch off, the information is not lost. Okay. Now coming to the memory classification hierarchy or a taxonomy diagram, you can see in the diagram here. So basically we have primary and secondary, right? As I said just now, you have primary and secondary. And secondary is also known as external memory, or it's also called as, you can just see what I'm writing here, mass storage, right? So I said ROM and RAM, volatile and non-volatile, I discussed that. Again, in ROM also we have different varieties like PROM, EPROM. Again, on module 4, we will discuss all these things in details. This is just an introduction session. Similarly, for RAM, basically earlier classified into two types, static RAM and dynamic RAM. Again, dynamic RAM is divided into multiple variations. Now, today we have in your computer or laptop, if you go and check, you have this DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, double data rate RAMs. Okay, so you get a lot of such varieties. Similarly, coming to the secondary memory, you have your hard disk, your solid state disk, SSDs, which is coming for your laptops and all nowadays, your CD, DVDs, all these things correspond to the secondary memory. So basically, what is the concept? Again, I'm telling you repeatedly that you can imagine a room a memory like a rectangle room, something like this. And you can imagine lot of desks arranged in the room, one behind the other. This is very important. This other means sequentially they are arranged. So technically we call them as locations or rows, something like that. So this is the basic thing about memory. So you assume that you have a space where you have arranged in sequence certain number of rows or locations, and in each location you can store some information, some data or some command, whatever you want to do in binary form. That's very important. Okay? So let us say I have some n locations over here. Okay, n locations. So let us like n desks. Okay, let us say 10 desks you have, let us say, in your classroom, and you have 3 students per desk. So what is the total capacity of the room? 10 desks multiplied by 3 students per desk. So 10 multiplied by 3 is 30. So total number of students in the classroom is 30. Same way we calculate for memory capacity also. Okay. So you have n locations, and in each location you are storing some number of bits. Okay. Let us say small n or whatever you call it as, or k or m. So you multiply the upper n, uppercase n with the lowercase n. That will be your memory capacity in bits. A group of 8 bits is called as a byte. So we usually give memory capacity in bytes. Okay. So you just have to know the number of locations. Okay. How do we decide all these things? We will discuss later. Okay. Now, coming to the next important concept. Now, in the first session, if you remember, we showed you a diagram like this, a functional blocks of a computer. I showed some 3 blocks like memory, CPU, IO, etc. I showed you, right? Something like this. But we didn't show any interconnection there because we just wanted to know what are the functional blocks of a computer. And as we all know, suppose you construct a building with different rooms and there is no passage to connect the rooms, and how do you move around, right? So for data transfer or communication, you need to connect all these devices. So CPU should be connected to memory, input device, output device, etc. That's a very important point to note. So we need some connecting path between these devices. Such a connecting path between these devices in a computer is known as a bus. Okay. And of course, as a synonym, you can take your BMTC bus itself or school bus itself. What a bus does, it carries passengers or students, right? That means it carries some information from one end to the other end. Similar way here also, suppose you connect a memory with a CPU, you have set of wires or group of wires connecting between them, because I said they are ICs, integrated circuits made up of semiconductors. That means they work with a particular voltage. So that means you need conductors to carry the current between those 2 devices. Those conductors are nothing but bus now, group of wires which carry electrical information from one device to another device in a computing system. Got it? Now, how do we connect them actually? Suppose I have one device here, another device here. You can see I'm doing the notation. Suppose there is only a single wire between these 2. Then it is called as a serial bus. That means your hardware is very simple. You just connect 2 devices with a single line or a single wire. That is serial data transfer, we call it as. But it is slow because everything has to be transmitted on the same link, and you have to do it in serial fashion or sequential fashion. Suppose I want to do data transfer at a fast rate, then I have to use more number of wires, right? Suppose I want to send 2 bits at a time. That is one wire carrying a low voltage, one wire carrying a high voltage. Then I need 2 wires. Then it is a bus now, more than one. Similarly, if I want to send 4-bit information, then I need 4 wires. Got it? So if I want to send n-bit information, then I'll have to take n bits or n wires. So group of such n wires carrying information from one device to another device is called as bus. Okay. How actually it is connected? It's shown in the diagram now. So you'll just go to the diagram to understand that concept. So this is the diagram through which you can easily know what is happening. So this is your system bus. This is your CPU or a processor, let us say. And one more important thing to note in this diagram is the arrow marks of the bus. Bus means group of wires. So if it is single wire, we will show a single line. If it is a bus, we have to show multiple lines like this. Please look at the annotations I'm doing. But writing so many lines will be quite difficult. So we show it as a box line like this, bus. Okay. Or you can write a single line with a slash notation like this. So that means this is a group of n wires. This way you can represent, or this way you can represent. This is a bus notation. Okay. Single wire means it is not a bus because there is only one wire. More than one wire, if it is there, then we show either in this notation or in the box notation. Here I'm showing in the box notation. Second thing is the arrow mark. The arrow mark indicates the direction of data transfer. Okay. For example, you can see input device. I have given a unidirectional arrow. Why? Last class we discussed input device means the user is giving information to the processor. That means processor is reading from the input device. So it is towards the processor, this unidirectional. Similarly, output device like your monitor or printer, you want to visualize. So processor sends some information to the output device. So that is unidirectional towards the device. Memory, I said read, write memory just now. That means what? You can either read from the memory what is available, or you can store a new information into the memory, so it should be bidirectional. So that is how you try to understand what is the meaning of direction of data transfer on the bus. Okay. Now, another important thing is all this operation, whatever is to be done in the system, in the computing system, whether it is mobile phone or laptop or a desktop or a reader or whatever, is with respect to a particular timing always. For example, now let us say I am taking class at 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock, you may have a class from a different person, different subject. So that means there is a timing for the operation of my class as well as the other class or a laboratory. How do we do every day? Similarly, all the operations inside the CPU also should be controlled with respect to a proper timing. Okay, that's very important. That will be done with the help of a signal known as clock. Okay, so that also we'll discuss in the later sessions once again. Now, coming to the interconnection of these functional parts, let us say I have a CPU and a memory. I'm showing once again the structure here as a block box. Okay. Now, just now I said memory is like a set of consecutive locations where data is getting stored. So that means CPU should know where is the data, right? Because memory may be huge. That means I should know in the class, the student is sitting in which row or which desk, so that I can go near him and try to talk to him or something like that. So similarly, CPU should also know where is the data stored. Okay, so then that means we need to know the address of the location. We need to know the address or row number or location number, which is called as the address of the location. Just like suppose someone writes a letter to your house, and on the top of the envelope they'll write the address, to address, right? So that means what? Like say house number 44, second cross, 4th Main, Jayanagar, something like that. It means if there is no address, the data cannot be delivered. So first important thing for communication is the address of the IO device or address of the memory. Once I know the address, then I can go to that address and do whatever the operations I want. That means I can read from there or write into that location. So that is the data. Then what time I'm doing this is with respect to control. So your entire system bus is divided into 3 parts: address bus, data bus, and control bus. Okay. So the diagram is shown here. Better you also write down once so that you understand this concept very well. Bus structure is very important to understand. So how external devices are connected to the CPU? Of course, using a bus, that's a common thing. But the bus itself is split into different functional parts called as address bus, data bus, and control bus. What is the purpose of address bus? CPU sends the address of the memory or IO device using the address bus. Okay. So you can see here, this is unidirectional. It will go from CPU towards memory like this or towards the device. Okay. Data bus. This is data bus. Data bus is shown as bidirectional because with memory you can read and write. Input device you will read, output device you will write. So since we are showing both input and output, we are showing it as bidirectional. Okay. And control bus. What is the use of control bus? Control bus will carries timing and control information or signals from CPU to the device or from device to the CPU. So just as an analogy, suppose I'm taking a class now, a physical class in the classroom, and I have, let us say, closed the door and somebody knocks on the door. That is a signal from someone else to me that someone else is waiting outside. Like that, a device can also send some signal to the CPU. Similarly, CPU can also give some signal to the devices. So control bus is also bidirectional. So shall I summarize now? Address bus is always unidirectional. Data bus and control bus are bidirectional. Okay, so this much concept we should know. We will discuss this again and again in all the different modules. Okay, so now coming to the basic operational concepts. So how memory and processor are interconnected and how they are actually communicating with each other. So let us first go to the diagram and then see the structure. Then I will try to explain that. Okay, so this is the diagram. This what is in the dashed box is your CPU. And the first session we have explained that CPU has ALU, registers, and timing and control unit, right? This much is there in the register. That is shown here. So timing and control unit is here, ALU is here. Registers we have expanded and shown like what are the names of the registers, how many registers are available in general in a particular processor, something like that. And this external is the memory. Now you can see this address bus. I have shown unidirectional, right? So address bus, that CPU has to give the address. So address bus is unidirectional towards the device. Data bus is bidirectional, you can see here. And of course, control bus is also bidirectional. Okay. So this diagram you should write. This will be a 6 marks or a 8 marks question. Depends how actually you are going to answer. So based on that, you need to answer this. So there are certain registers called as general purpose registers. They are named as R0, R1, etc. These are called as general purpose registers. That means they can be used to store results or data temporarily, and user can also use this with the instructions and all. And there are some other registers in the CPU always. They are called as special purpose registers. Here, of course, we have shown only 4. There may be other also in a practical scenario. So these are the special purpose registers. Please look at the names: MAR, MDR, PC, and IR. Okay. So I'll just take a break for 1 minute. You please write down this diagram. Okay. So that you'll understand this properly when we give the explanation. Okay. So the brief explanation of these special registers are shown here. Of course, this we'll discuss again in module 5 properly. So what are the first important thing? I'll go for the program counter register. This is the register which is very useful for execution of the programs. Program counter. The name is saying program counter PC, which holds the memory address of the instruction to be executed. And once again, I am asking you to recall all your programs and data are stored in memory. That is, your instructions are also in memory. Data, of course, is also in memory. So you need to read the instruction. The CPU needs to read the instruction from memory and understand what it is, and then try to execute the operation. So when you are having that information in memory, who is going to have the address of that instruction? There is a special register known as program counter. And another important feature of this register is it is auto updated. That means after fetching the first instruction, it automatically points to the next instruction. So that is the advantage of program counter. And program counter is not used by the user or programmer. This is one of the major feature of this, a distinguishing feature. This register, you cannot use it for your operation. This will be internally used by the CPU itself. Similarly, there is another register called instruction register, which holds the instruction code which is being fetched from the system, from the memory. That means whatever the instruction, like you want to do addition or subtraction or multi, whatever you want to do, that operation should be written again in binary form for the system to understand. So that is instruction register will hold that up. The instruction code, also called as op code, operation code. Now, another important register, memory address register and memory data register. So once again, I'll show you the diagram. You can see here, memory address register and memory data registers. These two are the only registers which are connected to the external world. You can see here the diagram. Okay, that is to access any memory or anything. You see, PC is not directly connected, IR is not directly connected, these GPRs are not directly connected, only MAR and MDR. So what is the purpose of MAR? MAR is the register, memory address register, which holds the address of the memory location to be accessed. What is MDR? MDR is the one which holds the data either to be written into the memory or which is read from the memory. Hope you got this point. MAR and MDR, two useful registers to access and operate with external memory. Okay, remaining all are used in the internal operations of the CPU. Then coming to the control bus is with respect to signals generated by the timing and control unit to coordinate all the activities in the system with respect to what is known as a processor clock, reference signal called clock. Okay, this is the instruction. And this kind of model where you store a program in the memory and then try to execute sequentially one by one, this is called as a stored program concept computer or von Neumann computer. Because the person who has designed this kind of an architecture is John von Neumann. So it's known as a von Neumann concept. Okay. So what are the steps to execute an instruction now? I have written it in a bulleted format so that it is easy to understand and write in the exam. So what I said, the program counter is set to point to the first instruction and PC is transferred to MAR because MAR is connected to the memory. So a read signal is sent to the memory and then first instruction is taken from loaded into MDR and it is transferred to IR. Of course, you will discuss this again later also. So just for the beginning purpose, you will try to understand only this much. Okay. And once it comes to IR, you have to understand, the CPU has to understand what to do. So we call it as decoding and then execution. Okay, because you may write it as addition, you may write it as subtraction, something like this with your own language, but the machine doesn't understand that language. So it understands only zeros and ones. So your operations are also given in zeros and ones, data also given in zeros and ones. This is a very important thing you should remember in this subject. Okay, I may write add on my paper, but that add has to be known to the hardware in binary format only. I may write subtraction or multiplication using English words, but it has to be again given in binary format. Suppose add corresponds to some code called as say 0 1 1 0. Subtraction may be like 0 1 1 1. So each of the operations what you perform will be a binary code, which we call it as opcode. So it has to be decoded. That is, it has to be identified which code corresponds to what operation. Then that corresponding registers or other devices should be activated. All this will be internally done by the CPU. Okay. In module 5, we will discuss all these details properly. Okay. So if it is an operation involving only registers inside the CPU, like suppose you want to add this and this, you transfer this to ALU, you transfer this data to ALU, ALU will perform the sum and the result should be transferred back to any of the, something like that. Or it can be an external operation that I want to read from memory a data, or I want to write this data to memory. So there may be any internal or external operations to be carried out. So after decoding, I will understand, the CPU will understand what is the operation to be carried out and corresponding signals will be generated. Okay. Now coming to the last topic of this session, software. So all these things we discussed about hardware, right? Memory, CPU, input device, output device, all physical parts of the computer which you can touch and feel are called as hardware. But to run the hardware, to work on the hardware, we need set of instructions, we said. Set of instructions is called as a program. A set of programs is called as a software. Easy way to remember. A set of programs. And there are two types: application software and system software. Application software, all of you are very much aware of. All your mobile phones, what you call apps, is an application software. So you have a lot of apps, even whether video games or whether your cam scanner or anything else. Similarly, on your desktop, you have SMS Word or your VLC player to see the videos, whatever. So all these are application softwares. Okay. So application softwares generally will be written in a particular language. So when I say language, it means I'm trying to give a command. So all the instructions or statements should be given in a format or a language which is understandable by the user. So those languages are called as high-level languages. So what are high-level languages? In C programming, you studied this, right? So that means a language, a programming language, which is used by the user is known as a high-level language, like C, C++, Java, Python, or whatever you write, right? But of course, the hardware doesn't understand this. As I said, it is a binary device or a semiconductor device. You need to make this as zeros and ones only. So the hardware or the processor understands only binary or machine language. So you need to make some changes, or you need to convert this from high level language to machine language. That we will see later. Another type of languages which we are studying in our subject now is called as assembly language. It is like intermediate between high level language and machine language. Machine language is too difficult because you have to remember all zeros and ones for everything, data, instructions and all. And as a user, it is quite difficult for us to do. High level language is very easy because we have certain syntax to write, and if you know the syntax, we can write the statements like printf, my name is, something like that, what you wrote in C language, right? So that's quite easy. But the problem is we will not know about the hardware structure with that. So to know a little bit more about the hardware structure and still do some programming on it, we go for a middle level language known as assembly language. There we use some English like words called as mnemonics. Suppose in C language, you write A plus B is an operator. Plus is an operator, we know. But in assembly language, we write add A comma B. So that plus operator is replaced with some English word called as add. This is called as a mnemonic. Okay, we will discuss in module 2 once again. So hope you got about what is application software to do all the user programs or user tasks. Another set of programs are known as system software, which is built into the system. That means we are not writing it, somebody has written it and then given it to us. So we'll be just using it to make our applications work on the hardware. So system software is like an intermediary between application software and the hardware. Okay, so if you try to write a simple diagram as a layered structure, it is something like this. So you have the innermost layer as hardware, above that you have system software, above that you have application software where user is operating, something like this. Okay, this is how it looks. So you can easily see that the system software helps you to perform your task easily without you knowing the details of the individual hardware. Okay. For example, you wrote C program in the first semester or second semester, you used a compiler, Turbo C compiler. So you just compiled your program and you run the program and you get the results. You really do not know how it is actually doing that printf or scanf or something. But we know that scanf means you have to read from keyboard, printf means you have to put the data on the screen. We know that, but how it is done internally, all those things will be taken care by the compiler. That is why system software helps us to do our task, okay, without too much worry for ourselves. So there are a lot of system softwares like assemblers, debuggers, loaders, linkers, compilers. There are so many required interpreters. And one of the major system software is the operating system, right? Of course, all of you know about this. Your mobile phone has an operating system, your laptop has an operating system, and without operating system, your hardware is actually a dumb device, right? You know that. Suppose in your laptop, you don't load a Ubuntu or a Windows 10 or whatever, simply having your keyboard mouse doesn't work, no? So operating system is a collection of routines responsible for controlling and coordinating all the activities in a computer. So entire hardware operations are always controlled by the operating system. What you have Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, or if you have a Linux, different versions or variations, Ubuntu, Fedora and all. So like that, right? So this is the basic introduction towards hardware, software and memory in this session. So we'll continue in the next session. So I have given some multiple choice questions to you just to recall all the topics, whatever we discussed. For example, which registers are connected to the memory address bus? Okay. So I have given options PCE, MAR, MDR, both PC and MAR, just to make you a little confused. Okay. So we know that from the diagram, PC is not connected, only MAR is connected. So it is, so these questions will help you to really recall the topics properly. Another question I have given is which register is auto incremented? I have given the options IR, PC, MAR, MDR, and we know program counter is the one which is auto incremented. So if you just go through the questions properly and then understand this concept, it will help you to make this subject more interesting. Okay, thank you all.